There we go. I hereby open the Planning Commission work session. Could we have a roll call, please?
Chair Driggs,
Here.
Vice Chair Schmunk,
Here.
Commissioner Ackland, Commissioner Gomez Hernandez,
Here.
Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner Greenwell, and Commissioner Depew.
Here.
All right. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? No? Okay. This meeting is a work session where the public may attend but not provide comment. There will be opportunities to address the Planning Commission later tonight during our regular session at 7:30. I now call agenda item Housing and Design Initiative Code and Plan Update Phase 1.
Great. Thank you, Planning Commission Chair. I'll have my assistant start the presentation. And I'll just make sure that hopefully this is on and working. Probably not.
While we're waiting, Commission, I'll just say thanks to Chanel Erickson for filling in while Sarah Weaver is out. And then we also have Alan, forgetting his last name, Cyrus, who is providing assistance with our audiovisual technology. So thanks to both of them for stepping in tonight in Sarah's absence.
Yeah, I'll just have Chanel. I'll just tell you when to go to the next slide. Okay. All right, just so we can keep going with this. So good evening. Tonight we're here to talk about an initial draft of the code and plan amendments for the Housing and Design Initiative. We're mostly focused on the commercial and mixed use districts as part of the Housing and Design Initiative for tonight's work session. And then my colleague Chelsea Hartman will cover the climate friendly areas after me. Chanel, next slide, please. So there are 4 recommendations we'll be discussing tonight based off of about a year of work that we've done from guidance from our consultant, Cascadia Partners, who you may recall. They are helping us with this project based off of a grant that we received from DLCD. The Planning Commission, obviously, we've taken it to you a couple times last year, but welcome to the new members who this may be your first time hearing about this project. City Council. We've done quite a few work sessions with them to get their feedback and suggestions on some of these policy recommendations that we'll be covering in tonight's work session. And then I also have a technical advisory committee. Those are groups of people who have experience in development in the community. Maybe they're developers themselves, architects, engineers, researchers, things like that, who advise me on some of these code amendments. And we also have a governance committee. That's 2 planning commissioners and 2 city councilors who advise me on an ad hoc basis on some of these recommendations. And we convene them, again, ad hoc, as needed. So the 4 recommendations that are just given as an overview first. Number 1, we are looking to allow housing in our mixed-use development in more locations. We'd like to provide more flexibility for size and location of commercial spaces in a mixed-use development. 3, we'd like to allow multiple unit standalone residential development in more locations. And 4, we'll be encouraging high density housing, again, in more locations. Chanel, next slide, please. So what does this look like? It's overly complicated, so bear with me. There's kind of a lot going on the screen, but this is a great overall summary of the proposed changes. So first, we're providing more opportunities for housing by allowing housing in a mixed-use development in more locations. This includes all sites less than 1 acre along Main Street and the South A Street corridor, all CFA sites, and all neighborhood commercial district sites. We'll lessen the economic barrier to mixed-use development by providing more flexibility for the size and location of commercial space in a mixed-use development. This looks like reducing the total amount of commercial space required in a mixed-use development. So again, usually on the ground floor, there's a minimum amount of the ground floor that needs to be occupied as commercial space. So we're reducing that usually from a much higher percentage to a lower percentage. And then we're also allowing them in separate buildings. So again, most of the time when we say mixed use, people are thinking of vertical mixed use, right? A ground floor of a building and residential above. Now we will allow horizontal mixed use, which means you could have a commercial building in the front and you could have a completely separate residential building behind, and we would still consider that to be mixed use. Okay. Next, we'll provide more opportunities for multiple unit housing in more locations. This includes all sites less than 1 acre on local and collector streets along Main Street and South A. So they'll take access usually from Main Street or South A, but they'll come from a local or collector street, not Main Street or South A itself. In the CFA overlay for mixed-use commercial lots not fronting on an arterial, again, so not on Main Street, not on South A, which again, Chelsea will get into later, and all mixed-use employment and mixed-use residential lots. Although the CFA overlay allows townhouses where we pretty much normally wouldn't in our mixed-use employment district. Finally, to ensure an efficient use of land and encourage high-density housing, we'll apply minimum density standards to all districts. We'll modify the height step-down standard in all districts. We'll allow greater lot coverage, again, that horizontal mixed use, in the neighborhood commercial and mixed-use residential districts, and we'll allow up to 4-story buildings in the neighborhood commercial district. And again, I'll go into this as we keep going along in the presentation. Next slide. So let's get started on the commercial districts. So the first topic to cover tonight is the permitted uses table and what we amended in that. We amended to allow new uses in the neighborhood and community commercial district. This is based off of, again, the Technical Advisory Committee, the Governance Committee, the Planning Commission, and ultimately Council's direction. We took this to them 4 work sessions from December, 2 in December and 2 in February. Just finished the last one last night to talk about basically these uses in our commercial districts and mixed use districts. So we've had quite a lot of feedback on these allowed uses and if they will work and what their concerns are as well. So the new significant changes allow mixed-use development with residential uses, again, in the neighborhood commercial and community commercial district along Main Street and South A. I'm going to keep saying that over and over. Hopefully no confusion there. We'll allow single-room occupancy, multiple unit housing, and townhouses in the community commercial district, again, on those local streets, local or collector streets that take access from Main Street. And we'll also permit residential homes and child care centers in both the neighborhood commercial and community commercial district, and residential care facilities only in the community commercial district. Hopefully, does everybody know what the difference is between a residential home and a residential care facility? No? Okay, so like a residential home is usually for people with disabilities. It's usually in like a single family home or a residential neighborhood. A residential care facility is usually for 6 or more individuals and more designed like a multifamily institute, I guess you could say. So we consider them to be kind of 2 different uses, and in that case would qualify under different standards, right? A residential care home would be more of that single family use versus a care facility would be more of that multifamily use, higher density. So more permitted in the community commercial district versus in the neighborhood commercial district. And the neighborhood commercial district is more geared toward providing amenities for residential neighborhoods. So your convenience store, your coffee shop, your small business that could be located and serve the residents of that neighborhood versus a community commercial district is usually seen along your main corridor, right? Most of Main Street is zoned that community commercial district. So that's why we're proposing more of these uses. And the example shown on the screen is an existing multifamily project on Main Street, if you've ever driven past there, where right now that use would currently not be permitted. So existing use, and we're now making it permitted. Next slide, Chanel. Okay. So another thing that we did is we reformatted the development standards so that each standard is in its own section. This is important because we currently had all of the standards kind of mixed together, and we wanted to separate them and make them distinct and make sure that the standards were very clear. So this looks like we created new standards, new sections for the standards, lot area dimension and density, setbacks, lot coverage and impervious surface standards, and height. The key changes to these sections: we apply a minimum density for development in the neighborhood commercial and community commercial district. So for mixed-use development in the neighborhood commercial and community commercial district, it's 15 dwelling units per net acre. And then for standalone multifamily housing, it's 20 units per net acre, and that would only apply in the community commercial district. When residential development is allowed in the community commercial district, the maximum lot size is 1 acre. This is to preserve our large undeveloped parcels or redevelopable parcels in our commercial industrial buildable lands inventory, where basically we found that we have a surplus of properties under 1 acre. So that's why we were specifically targeting those properties down Main Street for potential redevelopment or new development.
Haley,
Yes.
can I have you go back a slide? So I was just looking in the legislative amendments of the code, and for residential home, we actually have it not permitted in the neighborhood commercial. And that's because neighborhood commercial is in residential areas, and so you wouldn't need to have it be zoned neighborhood commercial to allow it. So that's just one discrepancy between the slides and the code that I wanted to point out, since this is going to be in a public recording for people to look at.
Thank you. And yeah, we may find instances where there are discrepancies. Unfortunately, AI is not advanced enough to catch all of errors that we have, and we don't really use AI, so it's all us correcting these errors. Thank you, Chanel. So back to the next thing, we also summarize the minimum ground floor requirements in a mixed-use building in the community commercial district in this section, and I'll get into that, the few options that we have for meeting that standard later on in the presentation. Next slide, please, Chanel. So getting into the specific development standards now, the first one is about setbacks. In particular, the existing standards are the same, except for one clause, and that's when you have residential, that would be abutting industrial. On the screen, this is a map presented to us from our GIS department. This just shows one portion of Main Street that could be impacted, in particular between 14th and 28th, because this is an area where we have community commercial that's rather close to some of our existing density, high density or low density industrial, heavy industrial. So here, in this case, we would increase the setbacks to 20 feet, and that setback may be reduced by 50% when a masonry or decorative wall that is at least 8 feet in height is provided. And this is based off of our existing code, where we actually do require 8-foot tall fences when you are residential abutting industrial. So just making sure that that clause is in there, is in the code, and people are aware of this requirement. Next slide, please, Chanel. So next, for lot and landscaping coverage, in the neighborhood commercial district, we increased the lot coverage standard from 35% to 60%. So again, if you're allowing horizontal mixed use, we wanted to increase that lot coverage, right? If it's 35%, you can't really have a horizontal mixed use development. There just wouldn't be enough buildable area. For screening and landscaping, the existing commercial district standard says that the minimum landscaping area is established by standards in other sections of the code. This isn't very clear about what we mean there, right? It doesn't point to the standard, doesn't tell us what the standards are. So to be clearer on what standards apply, we have added new design standards that are similar to our mixed use districts, which again, I'll get into later in the presentation, and our existing landscaping and screening standards. Our existing landscaping and screening standards point to specific things that must be landscaped and screened. And they're shown on the screen. In this instance, there are all parking and vehicular circulation areas, garbage and recycling collection areas, and ground-mounted utility equipment. So under our current code, these are the areas that must be landscaped and screened. Thank you. will increase the maximum height in the neighborhood commercial district from 20 feet to 50 feet. So again, I told you that the neighborhood commercial district is designed to serve the neighborhood, but we're also allowing it to be a mixed-use development where you'd have commercial on the ground floor, residential above. This is a great example, right, of a live-work situation. Maybe you have somebody who works at the convenience store or coffee shop below and they want to live above their residence, or they just want to be able to walk in their neighborhood. So this is a great option for them, and we'll be seeing hopefully more higher density housing in those locations. It's intended to support, again, that vertical mixed use with housing above. The current height limit would limit buildings to 2 stories, again, if it's only 20 feet. So the proposed height increase to 50 feet will allow those 4-story mixed-use buildings. The other option I want to talk about is this height step-down standard. This is a great example on the screen of basically what the existing standard is and what the proposed standard is. It's designed to improve market feasibility because it will reduce the minimum distance from the property line where height must step down. The step down will be reduced from 50 feet to 20 feet, or I'm sorry, 50 feet to 25 feet. This will allow more room for housing on upper floors. We will make it more feasible to construct buildings without a step down or to move the entire building outside of the setback area. So this example on the screen, it's basically showing that whenever you're within 50 feet of a R1 district property, you have to step down the building to the height of the abutting low-density residential district. So within 50 feet, the height of the building has to go down to 30 feet in our existing code. Our proposed code just goes from 50 feet down to 25 feet. So it just means that the building may be closer to the neighboring low-density residential district. And again, I just talked about how some developers may choose to move the building, or they're going to lose units if they have to go shorter, or they may just choose not to develop that portion of the property altogether because they know that they're going to have to abide by this standard, and they may just not want to. Instead, they may put parking in that area or landscaping in that area. So it's really designed to increase market feasibility for more higher density housing. Next slide, please, Chanel. I want to talk about some design standards. This is basically, when we think about design standards, we usually think about the design of a building, but there are also some development standards within that could be considered design standards, right? Landscaping, screening, sometimes we consider that to be design standards as well. So because we're allowing new mixed-use development and multifamily development in our commercial districts, we have to apply some design standards to those commercial buildings where right now we do not have any design standards for commercial buildings. It can look however the developer chooses to. This is also to comply with the CFEC walkable design standards, or Rule 330, which require some standards for the location of off-street parking areas, orientation of building entrances, and street connectivity and pedestrian circulation. These standards apply to all commercial districts and all mixed-use districts, with some exceptions for mixed-use districts that are primarily industrial focused. Although the building design standards will apply only to the community commercial district and only to development that exceeds 20 feet in height, because that is the district where we're going to be seeing the most multifamily or mixed-use development outside of like the neighborhood commercial, which are just those one-off properties, and most of the time they're in residential districts. And we also have existing multifamily standards that would apply to those developments for neighborhood commercial. So they already have their own standards. This is just how we're going to address multifamily or mixed-use development in the community commercial district. And then we also have to apply clear and objective or discretionary standards for all housing development. Next slide, please. So to get very clear on where these standards apply, the development standards clarify, again, which part of the city where we would allow mixed use, multi-unit housing, or townhouse development, and the minimum standards for commercial space in a mixed-use development. Again, I'm going to reiterate that this applies for mixed-use development with residential uses to the community commercial district. On the screen, those are the properties in red. Along Main Street and South A Street, they must be properties less than 1 acre, and generally they must be within 1,750 feet from Main or South A Street. So again, there could be some properties, as you can sort of see on 42nd, that are not quite fronting on Main Street or South A, but they're within that 750 feet from Main Street or South A. So these standards would apply to those properties as well. I just want to point out that the properties in blue on the screen, bluish gray, are in the East Main Refinement Plan area, and that's an area between 42nd and 54th that is already designated as mixed use. So it will continue to allow those other mixed use multifamily standards in that area already. Next slide, please, Chanel. So this is one of my favorite slides because it shows you the different options for meeting commercial requirements in a mixed-use development. And this came about because when we took it to our technical advisory committee, they really requested quite a few options for meeting mixed-use development on the ground floor, mostly because sometimes it can be quite difficult for financing to finance a mixed-use building. You could usually get financing for a 100% residential building, but you might not be able to get financing for ground floor commercial and residential above. So we wanted to provide as much flexibility as possible to meet the different requirements, if you will. So the first option is the minimum ground floor area. So in this option, you could have 30% of the total ground floor area of all of the buildings on the site, or 10,000 square feet, whichever is less. Option 2 will allow a minimum length of the street frontage to contain a commercial use. The code requires at least 50% of each ground floor street frontage within the site to be developed with a commercial or public and institutional use. The ground floor depth must be at least 25 feet. And the street-facing facade must include windows and doors. So this one is more about the frontage, right? So we're saying a minimum percentage of the development must have frontage on a street, and then it must come in at least 25 feet. That's the depth. And then within that depth, you have to have windows and doors. Again, facing the street. And then the third option is a commercial-ready space. So this allows a developer to build the entire ground floor of a building to commercial-ready standards. We're not going to require that it has a commercial use, just that it is built to commercial-ready standards. So at some point, it can either have a commercial use or it could have a residential use. But they must build to basically our building standards. This looks like having a horizontal occupancy separation between the residents immediately above a commercial use. Usually this is for fire separation purposes in case there's a fire on the ground floor. And then the ground floor height must be at least 12 feet tall. And I do want to point out that I did run these options by our building department, and they had no concerns with the proposal. So that was a great pro of these options. And then for the East Main Refinement Plan area, I do want to talk about, again, what our existing code says. The proposed amendments will add new design and development standards to the community commercial district in the East Main Refinement Plan area. It would not be appropriate to keep the existing standards that say a developer may develop under the R2 or R3 standards, so under the medium density residential or high density residential standards, because we have new design standards in the commercial district. So the proposal is to have either the commercial district design and development standards apply for properties zoned community commercial, or the mixed use district design standards apply if the property is zoned mixed use. And actually in area 2A, which can be a little difficult to see on the map, it's on 48th. That property is actually zoned mixed use residential. So in that area, the mixed use residential design and development standards would apply. Pretty simple. Next slide. We're going to move on to the mixed use districts, and hopefully this one will be pretty close to the commercial districts, and then we'll get on to the feedback and questions. Okay, so for the mixed use districts, we replace the existing permitted use table. The existing table uses highly specific uses, and the proposed table contains more general uses and categories that are used in our residential, commercial, and industrial district. If you've looked through our existing permitted mixed use table, it can be very, very specific. So what we mean is like confectioners, candy stores, billiards and pool halls, taxidermists. So very specific uses that you would only see clearly in this permitted use table and not in our other districts, right? Not in our residential, commercial, or industrial districts. So we really wanted to simplify this and create uniformity across the code. The more general use categories will resort again in a shorter table that is easier to use and allow for more consistent classification. The categories will also help to avoid issues where it is unclear how a specific use would be regulated if it does not exactly align with one of the specific uses listed in the current table. Overall, the biggest change is to the mixed-use employment district. No properties are currently mapped to the mixed-use employment district. So you're seeing the permitted use table now. Areas currently in the Booth Kelly Mixed Use District and Light Medium Industrial Community Commercial District will be rezoned to mixed use employment to reduce the total number of land use districts in the code. So does everybody know where Booth Kelly is and the Mixed Use Light Medium Industrial Community Commercial District? Yes. Good. Booth Kelly is in downtown and the Light Medium Industrial Community Commercial District is in Gateway. The table on the screen shows the proposed changes with one caveat. So I did mention before we started the recording that I attended council last night, and that was to discuss livability and compatibility issues, mostly in these areas where you're seeing mixed-use development in close proximity to low-density residential, and some of the complaints that council might have heard about noise, screening, landscaping and screening, things like that. They determined that they do not want to allow residential uses in the Q Laura Street area other than situations for on-site security or live-work situations. So in that instance, we would usually allow a night watchman's quarters, what we would call it. So in that instance, again, we would have usually the commercial or industrial on the ground floor and probably one unit above that use, usually for a caretaker or the property owner above. And that recommendation would apply to the LMICC area now, which will be rezoned to mixed-use employment, and the Booth Kelly area as well. There will be a caveat, of course, for the Booth Kelly area that is within the climate-friendly areas portion, and Chelsea will get into that when it's her portion of the presentation. And suffice it to say, again, all of this is based off of feedback, that I receive at Council and Planning Commission about how we proceed with these changes. So for the development standards, it's very similar to what we're doing in the commercial districts because we like uniformity. So we're applying the same density standards for the mixed use district as we are to the commercial district. It's 15 units per net acre for mixed use development and the mixed use commercial, mixed use employment, and mixed use residential. We would allow 20 units per net acre for standalone residential. Again, that's going to be multi-unit housing, middle housing, etc., in the mixed-use residential district in particular. So just in those districts that we would allow multifamily housing. Because we will allow townhouses in the mixed-use districts, we had to establish a minimum frontage requirement. So townhouse lots typically range from 1,000 to 2,000 square feet, and we have a minimum frontage of 15 feet. To make it easier to meet this new density standard proposal, there is no minimum lot size for townhouses, and the permitted use table will refer to the development standards in the residential district for townhomes, which contain minimum street frontage, again, that 15 feet. And then there are also standards within that section for exception language if you can't meet the minimum frontage, because there can be some lots where it's just not feasible or possible. On December 8th, we asked Council how they wanted to handle the maximum building setback in the downtown mixed-use area. Council directed staff to remove this provision and allow flexibility for developers to figure out the building location on their development site. So no longer can we say max setback of 10 feet. We did away with that and just said, you, the developer, choose how far or how close you want to build your building to the street. We will also increase the maximum lot coverage standard in the mixed-use residential district. We went up from 45% to 60% to allow for more buildable area. And we also modified the height step down standard. Again, it's the exact same as in the commercial district. We went from 50 feet to 25 feet from an R1 or R2 property. We are creating new design standards in our mixed use district. Again, most of our mixed use districts already had design standards that were pretty close to what we are proposing in the new code language, with just a couple of caveats. The most significant changes include replacing the existing building design standards with new base metal top. This graphic on the screen basically shows what we mean by base metal top. It's separated by the bottom, the middle, and the top. The intent is to create visually appealing, human-scaled, and vertically articulated structures, where to break down the mass into distinct proportional sections. Again, bottom, middle, top. These standards are common in mid-rise urban areas serving residential apartments, office buildings, or mixed-use developments. This was at the direction of some of our staff who saw that design standards in urban core areas should be different than our existing multifamily standards. Our existing multifamily standards are more geared toward multifamily in our residential districts. We have more open space and landscaping requirements in those areas than we would probably like in an urban core area. So in this instance, we needed to create new design standards that were focused more on that core dense look of a building that you see in, again, those downtown highly mixed use areas. The CFAC walkable design standards, again, require new standards for the location of off-street parking areas, orientation of building entrances, and street connectivity and pedestrian circulation. These are standards that we have to comply with per state law. And then instead of removing the existing ground floor window, weather protection, landscaping and screening, and pedestrian amenity standards, we're going to retain them, but we are going to simplify and create clear and objective or discretionary options for meeting these standards. So again, we didn't do away with these standards, we just made them clear and objective or discretionary and tried to simplify them where sometimes they're really overly complex. The development standards. So this is where we want to talk about the biggest change to basically the requirement for ground floor commercial, industrial commercial, or 100% residential. So as you can see on the screen, the existing standard in the mixed use commercial district, it requires 60% of the ground floor area to be a commercial use. But we are proposing to reduce the amount of ground floor commercial space to 30% of the ground floor area. This will lower the risk of vacant commercial space, make more room for housing on the ground floor in a mixed-use building, and will generate higher revenue per square footage by allowing ground floor residential. In the mixed-use employment district, we'll allow only security or live-work residential uses above an industrial or commercial use. So this section here is subject to change. The original proposal was a minimum of 60% of the total ground floor area, or 10,000 square feet, must be either an industrial or commercial use. Again, that's subject to change based off of council's direction and your direction tonight. But again, the intent was to preserve the mixed use employment for primarily industrial or commercial uses with minimal residential uses. Not saying that they're not permitted, they would be permitted, but the intent is that industrial commercial use. And then amendments to the mixed-use residential district, they're pretty minimal. We did not really propose any changes. You can have a 100% residential building in the mixed-use residential if you want to. Slide, please. So on to the recommendations. This meeting is an opportunity for the Planning Commission to provide input and direction on the proposed code amendments. Does the Planning Commission have any questions, concerns, or recommendations? Does the Planning Commission find that the amendments will, 1, increase housing affordability, production, and choice in our commercial and mixed-use districts? That's the language that we use because that was the grant funding that we received for this project, was to increase housing affordability, production, and choice. And then 2, we recognize that our mixed-use district was not clear and objective. So in particular, we knew that we needed to make our mixed-use districts clear and objective, but also because now we are allowing housing in our commercial districts, we also needed to make our commercial districts clear and objective. So opening up the floor now for questions and feedback.
There we go. Um, so I saw that there was no density maximums. Was that a recommendation from the TAC group?
Ha, hi. Oh, it's only one person can have their mic on at a time. Usually it's because we don't have a maximum right now, and then also there are some CFA requirements depending on the area where we cannot have a maximum.
Did any other commissioners have any questions or comments? No? Okay, then I think that's your portion, Haley.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Oh my gosh, I'm under time. That is impressive. Thank you very much for having me tonight. I know this is really technical information. So of course, if you guys have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm available via email or via phone, and I'm happy to answer any of them. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And I will now call the agenda item Climate Friendly Areas Overlay. And we will be hearing from Chelsea Hartman.
So good evening, commissioners. I'm Chelsea Hartman. I'm a senior planner and project manager for the Climate Friendly Areas project. It's been about a year since we last gave an update on this project, so it'll be totally new for some of you, and it's been a while for others. Thank you for getting the presentation going, Chanel. Perfect. Awesome. Can you please go to the next slide? I know all the logistics. Or is it, can I do it? Okay. So I'll start with a brief refresher, and I'll refer to them as CFAs, but stands for Climate Friendly Areas. But just to make it a little briefer without saying that a million times in the few slides that we have tonight, I'll start with a refresher of what the project is, and then go into an overview of the CFA Overlay District. That is specific to the Downtown and Mohawk CFAs, which implements our secondary CFA requirements, and I'll explain what those are in a moment. And then we'll wrap up with just next steps and discussion. Does it work? Next slide, please. Thank you. So Oregon's climate-friendly and equitable communities rules were passed in 2022 in response to an executive order from Governor Brown. The rules require some cities, including Springfield, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by identifying and adopting one or more climate-friendly areas that will allow for dense urban mixed-use centers where people have options to meet most of their needs without relying on a car. Some of the specific requirements for CFAs include at least one primary CFA that's at least 25 acres in size. The CFAs, either one or multiple of them, must accommodate at least 30% of our 20-year housing need. And for Springfield, that includes a little less than 10,000 housing units. The CFAs must allow for a mix of uses and be accessible by existing or planned high-quality bike, pedestrian, and transit networks. In Springfield, that includes the MX route, Route 11, and a future transit route that will serve the Mohawk Boulevard area. And lastly, the project must include strategies to help people avoid having to move elsewhere due to higher housing costs that could result from redevelopment as that occurs over time. So in February 2025, Council provided direction to designate the Glenwood Riverfront as a primary CFA and Downtown and Mohawk as our secondary CFAs, and the three of those help meet our housing need as required by the rules. So primary CFAs have higher allowed heights and higher densities. The Glenwood Riverfront CFA currently meets this and is more permissive than the requirements. Glenwood currently has no maximum heights and has a minimum density of 50 units per net acre. And then secondary CFAs can be any size, and they have lower allowed heights of at least 50 feet and a required minimum density of 15 units per net acre. And those standards aligned pretty well with what exists in our Downtown and Mohawk areas currently. So this work session will focus just on the downtown and Mohawk secondary CFAs that are being implemented with the CFA overlay district. This overlay district primarily relies on the standards that exist in the base mixed-use districts that Haley just covered. So we've been coordinating the amendments in those two, which is why we're bringing them together tonight. The CFA overlay does include some specific standards that are just unique to the downtown and Mohawk CFAs. A few of those things include maximum block length that supports walkability to comply with the CFA requirements. These areas will continue to prohibit new auto-dependent uses consistent with what exists in the existing nodal development overlay that's being replaced with the CFA overlay in these areas. Will allow existing auto-dependent uses to continue or expand. The auto-dependent uses include things like vehicle repair, gas stations, car washes, or auto and truck sales. We did revise the code to allow new auto-oriented uses in the CFA overlay, so that'll be something different. Auto-oriented uses include things like drive-throughs. Another difference is that standalone housing will be allowed in the mixed-use commercial areas within the CFA that do not have frontage on arterials, and that was to allow more housing opportunities in most of the area, but continuing to require mixed-use or commercial development on our arterials where we want to focus employment uses. And the mixed-use employment areas in the CFA will allow townhomes, which aren't allowed outside the CFA in that district, and allow standalone residential as well, and that's to comply with the CFA requirements. The mixed use or standalone non-residential development is allowed throughout the entire CFA overlay, and so the result is just opening up opportunities for that type of development within the mixed use residential district in the CFA overlay. So really the CFA is just kind of allowing a more flexible mix of uses than exists in the base districts. Next slide, thank you. So the proposed downtown changes for the plan designations and zoning maps are in attachment 4 in your packet. The key changes in downtown include rezoning zone or districts that are primarily residential, such as R2 and R3, to become mixed-use residential to account for us needing to allow a mix of uses. Same thing with rezoning community commercial to mixed-use commercial. And then there were several Willamette properties that were zoned residential, and just for a cleanup, we've talked with Willamette about changing those to be public land and open space to reflect the existing conditions and intended use for that area. And then lastly, the CFA overlay will replace the nodal overlay in downtown, since those two achieve the same basic intent of allowing mixed use within walking, biking, and transit options, or areas with walking, biking, and transit options. And then for the next slide, Mohawk is a little simpler. Most of this area is already zoned and designated mixed use, primarily mixed use commercial with a little bit of mixed use residential. Again, we'll replace the nodal overlay with the CFA overlay here. And then we are rezoning. There's a small portion of R1 on the Mackenzie Willamette Hospital property, and we'll just be changing that to mixed use commercial so that property has consistent zoning throughout that better matches the use there. And next slide, my last slide. This one's a little shorter since CFAs doesn't give us a whole lot of wiggle room. So it's pretty straightforward with implementing the state requirements. So on March 17th, there will be a joint Springfield and Lane County Planning Commission work session that's going to focus on the Glenwood Riverfront CFA Planning Code amendments. That one's being implemented a bit differently since it's for primary requirements with the higher density. And Glenwood pretty much already meets a lot of the requirements. So we'll talk about that next month. And then ultimately, council will formally designate the CFAs and adopt the corresponding planning code amendments. The Glenwood CFA does require co-adoption with Lane County since there's property outside of the city limits, which is why that next meeting will be joint with Lane County Planning Commission. And we do have the project deadline to complete and adopt CFAs by the state deadline of the end of this year. Like to open it up for any questions or feedback you all may have on the draft CFA overlay district.
All right, are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, Commissioner Schmunk?
Okay, with regard to CFAs and the meeting the housing needs, so have we got any relationship between, I mean, we could potentially stack us 90% of the population in Springfield on high rises in these areas, correct? I mean, conceptually, I mean,
Conceptually, so the primary CFA doesn't have maximum height, so those buildings could be tall. In the downtown and Mohawk, there are some height limits, so it mostly relies on the existing mixed
yeah,
use
I'm not talking about
districts,
height, I'm
but
talking about occupancy, the number of folks in
density.
these areas, the
Mhm.
density. I'm wondering, do we have some relationship between other housing and these areas? In other words, do we have a point at which we say, you know, we've got enough in these areas. We want other types of housing so that there's a transition for families through the housing cycle?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Another project the team will be working on is the housing capacity analysis. That will look more broadly about where we allowing different housing types throughout the city. We'll be kicking that work off pretty soon this year. And so that will look, CFAs is mostly focused on multifamily or multi-unit housing, but the downtown and Mohawk secondary CFAs have that lower density that will allow some middle housing types, which was intentional since council wanted to allow homeownership opportunities. But that next project will look more holistically at housing and will likely have to increase density in other parts of the city as well as part of that.
Okay, density,
Mhm.
not necessarily.
Housing types, different, we'll have to plan for a variety of housing as part of that work.
Okay, I mean, typical residential area here, not very dense per se, but so that would be part of the mix.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, thank you. Yeah, that was all I had.
Commissioner Green?
Yes, thanks. I've asked this before and maybe I just don't remember the answer, but can you describe briefly the coordination between the Glenwood CFA and the rezoning and incorporation that's going on down there?
Good question. We'll get into it a little bit more next month, but we have looked at the Glenwood Master Plan area amendments, and they essentially the CFA is maintaining the intent of those amendments and broadening them to the entire CFA. What that project did was just allow more of a mix of primary uses. Currently, Glenwood has a residential mixed use district, an office mixed use, and a commercial mixed use. The CFA will be changing that to a general mixed use that's just more flexible, which is basically what the master plan did, but just for a small area within Glenwood, within the CFA. So we'll be maintaining that, what they just changed, but just broadening that to the full CFA.
Sorry, one more. Going to allow the drive-throughs within the area, but the drive-throughs have to have some occupants or some sit-down areas. So you couldn't have, go ahead.
Yes, that's correct. That's the code kind of difference. Drive-throughs that have a seating component can be auto-oriented in that definition, so those will be allowed. But if it was purely just a drive-through with no option to go inside and sit inside, then that falls under the auto-dependent uses, which are not allowed. New ones aren't allowed. Right, existing could continue or expand under the current code.
Okay, so it's sorry, a Dutch Brothers type
Mhm.
standard footprint that would not be allowed.
Would not allow new,
Yeah,
correct?
okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Oh, Sandy had something.
Yeah, I'd like to, also just for my benefit, if we could go over again, with the climate friendly areas, is there a maximum density and or height? And is that because it's a climate friendly area, or is it because of the based, zoning district?
Yeah, so the overlay is relying on the mixed use districts, the base districts that Haley just covered, because those mostly comply. per the CFA rules, we have to allow certain maximum heights. So for the CFAs, Glenwood already goes beyond that. But for downtown and Mohawk, we have to allow at least 50 feet in height. Most of the existing base districts allow that or higher. Some of them don't have a maximum height. Some allow up to 90 feet currently, so we didn't need to change that. And then with density, we did have to add the minimum density that Haley covered earlier in the base mixed use districts to meet the CFA requirement. And then there are no maximum densities to just allow that opportunity for CFAs. Does that cover what you're hoping?
But there's no maximum density in the mixed use district. It's not because it's a CFA.
Correct.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, I know it gets confusing looking at it all.
Okay. Then I think that does it. I will go ahead and adjourn the work session. I hereby open the regular session of the Springfield Planning Commission. Is no change to the attendees. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? No? Okay. Well, then those in attendance, we will go ahead and have the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands.
Liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have the minutes to approve from our January 6th meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes? No suggested corrections? Okay, then if there are no corrections, then the minutes from January 6th are approved. We will now take business from the audience. This is the time in our agenda for the public to provide testimony on any topic relevant to the Planning Commission, not otherwise on our agenda tonight. Is there anyone online in attendance that isn't city staff? Okay. Okay. Then we do not have any business from the audience. We will now hear business from the Planning Commission. Are there any reports on council action?
Yes. This report on the January 20th City Council meeting and work session. The work session was all about the continuing efforts of the Springfield and Eugene Fire Departments to figure out how to best serve the communities. Quite challenging with two city departments, two different budget scenarios, but they have it well in hand. It was good to hear. Regular meeting, there was a presentation from Stan Petrov, who of course has been before us a couple times talking about the CIP. It was heartening to hear him reference us and that he had presented the stuff to us as well. And the council appeared to respect that. That felt kind of nice. There was discussion about filling one of the council positions from Ward 4 and some interesting concerns from the audience that the open period, the vacancy period was approaching one of the records for the longest open period of a council. It was interesting to hear that concern. And that was about it other than normal business.
Thank you. Is there any other business from the Planning Commission? Okay, I will go ahead and present on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So they created an end of year report. So the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee is also made up of two subcommittees, one of which is the Education and Outreach Subcommittee. The second is the Accessibility and Connectivity Subcommittee. So in 2025, The Education and Outreach Subcommittee of the Springfield Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee worked closely with the Eugene Active Transportation Committee and Willamette Lane Park and Recreation District staff to advance shared goals around regional connectivity and community engagement. BPAC and Eugene's ATC maintain a strong connection through liaisons from each regularly attending the other committee's meetings. And let's see. The subcommittee collaborated with local partners, including Willamette Lane, Shift Community Cycles, and Safe Routes to School to host and support a series of interactive family events. Those included the Mega Hunt, which is the Easter celebration, Willamette Lane's annual Easter celebration. BPAC provided hands-on educational engagement for attendees and partnered with Shift Community Cycles, who brought their art bike. Let's see. So Wheels by the Willamette. So multiple times throughout the summer and during May's Bike Month, this event focused on promoting bicycling and safe active transportation in Springfield. BPAC members helped plan and staff the booth, distributed safety giveaways, and provided information about committee initiatives. They staffed the transportation hub at the block party. Part of that was a transportation garden where children practiced bike safety and some learned to ride a bike for the first time. So in October, there's Walktober, which is coordinated through wewalklane.org. BPAC organized 2 community walks in October, the Island Park and Willamette River Birding Walk on October 4th, and the Springfield Mayor's Walk on October 18th. The Birding Walk was a guided stroll along the river to learn about local bird species. The Mayor's Walk invited residents to join the mayor and BPAC members for a social, community-oriented walk that highlighted accessible routes and the benefits of walking for health and connection. And that was... and in the spring, Springfield had a temporary transportation planner who reviewed the active transportation web pages and worked with the Education Outreach Subcommittee to refine updates, focus on clear navigation, refresh content, and improve access to information. The other subcommittee, the Accessibility and Connectivity Subcommittee, coordinated and conducted 2 safety audits to assess multimodal conditions and identify opportunities for improving bike and pedestrian safety throughout Springfield. The first audit was in Glenwood, and that audit focused on evaluating wayfinding efforts and reviewing ongoing multimodal improvements. The audit team identified Glenwood as a multimodal desert with inconsistent infrastructure that poses barriers to safe walking and biking. However, existing and planned improvements in the area are expected to significantly enhance accessibility and safety. Some of those improvements are currently being implemented by the transportation planning team. The second audit was around the Mohawk shopping area in September. Those locations were selected based on observed barriers to multimodal travel and anecdotal reports of unsafe conditions. The audit found that multimodal infrastructure remains insufficient to promote active transportation and highlighted the need for consistent and connected pedestrian and bike facilities. Both audit locations were chosen in anticipation of the upcoming Walk and Roll Springfield, which is the active transportation plan that's going to be launching this year. And also in May, BPAC, along with Eugene's Active Transportation Committee, had a coordinated bike ride. They rode along from Alton Baker into Springfield, so under I-5 there, and identified it some need for wayfinding signage, and their recommendations were to have consistent signage placement, improve route visibility, and better connections to key destinations. And currently, Willamette Lane is working with the city on putting up some wayfinding. They're currently working on that so that people biking in between Eugene and Springfield will know where like the major destinations such as like the city and the university, downtown Springfield. Doris Ranch was another location that they'll list, and I think one of the bike paths is going to be on those signs too. BPAC also identified some initial bike and pedestrian counting locations to help with Walk and Roll Springfield. Those are going to be in the Virginia Daisy corridor east of 42nd Street, Marcola Road east of V Street, and 36th Street north of Main. These locations were selected due to their planned or in progress capital improvement projects, and the counts are intended to provide data so it can be compared against future post-construction observations, and follow-up counts will be conducted. And then I think that was it on their end of year report. They also worked on a memo with Eugene's Active Transportation Committee, a joint memo that was then presented to both city councils, and I believe they shared it with Willamette Lane as well. I've also, with the help of our transportation planning team, provided the maps of the bicycle routes throughout the city, and it also includes the connections to Eugene. I think it shows Eugene's as well. Yes. Are there any questions? Yes, Sandy.
I don't have a question, but just a comment. So we haven't always provided the Planning Commission with the end of year report from the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We're also going to be providing you a link to the Regional Transportation Plan in an upcoming memo. But realizing that you're going to be getting more involved in transportation issues as we embark on Walk and Roll, preparing that active transportation plan, and then ultimately updating our transportation system plan to comply with the climate-friendly equitable communities rules, and also just to bring it up to date. So there will be some major planning efforts involving transportation coming your way over the next several years. So trying to get you a little more familiar with the activities, programs, and projects that have to do with transportation, because that's not something that we've focused on with the commission over the last few years outside of the every 2-year capital improvement program.
And Drew, one of the transportation planners, did say that in late spring or early summer, they're going to be coming to us for Walk and Roll Springfield. And Walk and Roll Springfield will assess and address bike and pedestrian connectivity throughout the city. Any questions?
You guys might want to jump in. I got a number of questions. I don't want to take too long. I'm just curious about a few things. So you said there's some counting locations. Is there a lot of that went on? So they have sort of I mean, how much information do you have about the type of transportation being used, the speeds that they might be going, or what function they're, having?
Yeah, so this is specifically focused on bike and pedestrian, so not as much like auto counts. It's going to be
Okay.
and they identified these areas where the staff and BPAC likely will be conducting counts of
Okay.
pedestrians and bikes, but that hasn't happened yet.
Well, so motorized scooter, how's that in this mix?
Motorized bikes,
Like,
scooters,
Not motor, I shouldn't say motor,
skateboards.
electric.
Yeah, electric,
Yeah.
yeah. They're kind of a countrywide issue at the moment, definitely statewide as well. Michael, one of the engineers at the city, just recently uploaded some videos and tutorials information about electric bikes, scooters, skateboards on the city's website. I haven't had a chance to review them yet, but it talks about etiquette.
Okay, well, what I'm interested in is, I mean, I don't think you can stop the things. They're going to come. They're going to come in various forms, right? So, what I'm wondering is, if there is discussions along the idea that you have certain paths that these vehicles can be on, that ultimately, obviously, for all this, bicycles or whatever, you got to have a path from A to B. You can't be going around. I noticed there's some bottleneck locations where this looks like it'd be hard to get through there. So that's a separate question. But so has there been discussions about specific paths that might be appropriate for faster vehicles and or shared? I know there's some shared places, but I don't think that's what they mean, is it?
No, I think shared in here, they're meaning shared like bicycle and pedestrian paths, like mixed use paths. I don't know that they have addressed that yet. It's definitely in their minds and
Okay.
they're thinking about it. It probably will come up during walk and roll, I would guess. But there's no identified solutions as of yet.
Okay. Okay. So, okay. Well, I guess I would encourage to, look at this in a holistic way and, okay, how do you get these vehicles, how do you accommodate these vehicles, and still provide what would be, because they're going to be unsafe if they're mixed up too much, right?
Right.
Obviously. So, in terms of signage, I saw some pictures of some signage. It says so many, miles or whatever to this location, so many miles to this location. So, is there, and there is a map on the web page where you can roll through it and see the transition in construction. And I'm wondering if there's a map or talk of a map that you could be out on the path and you go up to a sign and there's the barcode or QR code and you touch it and you got a map on your phone suddenly. And the other part of that is that you may be a sign that says, Valley River, 1 mile this way, 7 miles this way, that kind of thing. So they know, so somebody doesn't say, okay, I can get to Valley River this way, but they go the wrong direction.
Yeah, that exact topic was just talked about, was it last week during the last BPAC meeting? They threw around the idea of adding like QR codes to wayfinding signs that would
Okay.
pull up a map. But they're basically all cyclists and they have all said, I just open up Google. I'm not going to open that up. I'm going at a certain speed. I'm not going to stop to scan a barcode. If someone is lost, most likely they're just going to pull up Google anyways, because that's what they're comfortable with. That's what they know.
Okay, so providing a web page with that information would be extra expense that's not really needed.
Yeah,
Okay.
from their experience as cyclists throughout the two cities, they said that it probably wouldn't be used enough, really.
Okay. See,
And in terms of the like the having the distance and everything, they did discuss if that was needed, if because the signs under I-5 are going to say like this far to downtown and it'll be like pretty close. So they discussed like just leaving distances off for some really close items, but they wanted to remain consistent with all of the other wayfinding signs that are out there that all have distances on them. Um, and some of the parents in the room said that that's really helpful for when they're out like biking with kids and they can say, "Oh, this is how far it is. I know my kid doesn't have like the energy or their stamina to keep going and we'll just go back."
well, the last question. So I noticed there's some bottlenecks. So is there opportunities for grants to fix that, or are these major? I mean, I look at one. It's under what is it, Pioneer Parkway? I think it is.
Yeah, that
Pioneer Parkway there from basically where Hamlin's fields are through to Q Street. They look like a bottleneck right there. Um, s- uh, I guess part of what I'm thinking is that the adoption of these bike paths is going to be highly dependent on the ability to get through there quickly. If you've got to stop every mile and wait for lights, what have you. So I know not an easy answer, but is there grants available to try to improve some of this or?
there are some major bottlenecks that have been identified by transportation planning staff. Connecting the E-Web path to the Pioneer Parkway bike path. Um, and let's see, connections over the railroad by International Paper to kind of connect the Thurston trails. There's also another, it's in the planning phase, another trail to connect Thurston through High Banks Road up to 42nd. That's a Willamette project, and they're in the planning phase of it now. So they're really looking at feasibility. Um, they don't know if it will be feasible or not, but they're hoping to create that. Um, the one of the big issues is getting over like the railroad over there. Anytime you come up against a railroad, you have to deal with the railroad with Union Pacific, I think it is. And they are not forthcoming in giving up any usage of their property. Creating like bridges over these spots is very costly. Um, so they know that these exist. They're thinking about them. Um, any grants that do become available, I'm sure they're applying for them. I would think most of the grants are from like the FTA or like ODOT, and they aren't really out there right now because of
Expensive.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay. Any other questions? No? Any business from Development and Public Works?
Yes, I do have one mixed blessing to share. So Chelsea Hartman, who presented to you tonight on the climate friendly areas, she is taking a new job. So we are losing her as a senior planner. So that's the sad part. The happy part is that she's not leaving the city. She will continue to be a city employee, but working out of the city manager's office as our new legislative and economic liaison. I forget the exact title. anyway, she'll be working under Ally Camp, working on legislative issues and helping with the Glenwood Master Plan and such. So that project, the climate friendly areas, is something I'll be taking over for her. So please be giving me grace as we go forward. And if you see Chelsea, you can congratulate her on her new job. And that's all I have for staffing at this time. We do have you busy for the next couple months. So we have 2 meetings each month for at least the next couple months and probably beyond that. So pay attention to your email. And the next meeting in April, I will not be here, but Mark will be here. Sarah will be back. And it's just a public hearing. There's no work session. So it's just a public hearing on a short-term rental that will come to you. And then following that, as Chelsea said, will be the Glenwood climate-friendly area. She is coming back for that, although I'll be presenting, but she'll be here to help me transition into that role and answer questions that she might have a better handle on than I do. So, yes.
What are our March meeting dates?
Have to look at the calendar.
I think the 17th is the joint meeting with Lane County.
Yeah, so that would be Tuesday, March 3rd for the public hearing at 7 o'clock. And then the 17th is the joint. It'll be work session and public hearing. That will be here. I think my understanding is there are 1 or 2 commissioners who will be coming in person and the others will be online. In the past, we've tried to do these joint meetings largely virtually, but it sounds like with a couple of them coming, there'll be space to include everybody up here. So it's really up to you if you want to come in person or be online. But I'm guessing that it's probably best to be in person since they'll have some in person. If you can come, that's probably the preferred.
All right, if there is nothing else, then I will go ahead and adjourn the Planning Commission regular meeting.